At exactly 7:04 a.m., before most people had poured their first cup of coffee, a woman I had never met stood on my porch like she owned my life. She didn't knock. She didn't smile. She pointed. "That fence comes down," she said flatly, "or you lose the house." I was still barefoot, pajama pants, sleep in my eyes. And somehow, I was already being threatened with foreclosure. She introduced herself as Veronica, head of the HOA Enforcement Committee. The way she said it wasn't informational, it was a warning, like a badge she expected me to fear. I tried to stay calm. I told her the fence was county approved. I even held up the permit. She didn't look at it. Instead, she pressed a violation notice into my chest. $500, 7 days to comply. Failure would trigger further remedies. When I pointed out 3 identical fences down the street, untouched for years, her expression didn't change. "They followed the rules," she said. Then she turned and walked away. Standing there in the quiet morning air, heart pounding, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Because I hadn't bought this house to fight. I bought it to survive. 6 months earlier, I'd lost a brutal divorce, half my savings, and most of my trust in systems that claimed to be fair. This place was supposed to be my reset. A small home, quiet street, no drama. And yet here I was, being told that a legal fence could cost me everything. What I didn't know yet was that this wasn't about a fence. It was about power. And Veronica had just picked the worst possible person to push. The first thing I noticed wasn't the fines. It was the pattern. Veronica didn't enforce rules equally, she enforced them strategically. Within weeks of moving in, I started seeing her everywhere, measuring lawns, photographing mailboxes, writing notes with surgical precision, but only at certain houses. Never Jim's place, the retired investor with the new fence identical to mine. Never the families who attended HOA dinners. Never the people who fit. But always the same names on violation letters. Mine. Mrs. Rodriguez, a single mom 2 houses down. Mr. Kim, quiet, elderly, English as a second language. Every citation was minor, decorative issues, safety concerns. A drip irrigation line placed 2 inches too far, nothing major on its own until you stacked them. That's how the pressure worked. When I questioned the fence violation formally, Veronica didn't argue facts. She escalated. While I was at work one afternoon, my phone buzzed. "HOA is on your property," my neighbor texted, "with a contractor." My stomach dropped. I called Veronica immediately. She answered on the second ring. "Emergency inspection," she said casually, "potential structural hazard." I reminded her she needed notice. She quoted a rule that didn't exist. By the time I got home, my yard looked like it had been searched. Footprints, measuring tape marks, new violation notices taped to my door. But Veronica made a mistake. She assumed no one was watching. My elderly neighbor, the one everyone underestimated, had recorded everything from her kitchen window. The audio was clear. "Find something," Veronica told the contractor. "Anything, if the city flags it, permits won't matter." The contractor resisted, said the fence looked fine. Veronica didn't care. And then came the sentence that changed everything. "We can't let people like him drag the neighborhood down." That night, I didn't sleep. Because suddenly, this wasn't an HOA issue. It was targeted. And once I started looking deeper, the financial records, the meeting minutes, the contracts, the truth emerged. Emergency inspections approved without votes. Contracts routed to businesses tied to board members. Selective enforcement disguised as standards. This wasn't incompetence. It was a system. And I was standing in its crosshairs. The lien notice arrived on a Thursday. Certified mail, thick envelope, official language designed to make your hands shake. They were placing a financial claim against my home. $2,500 in fines, non-negotiable, accruing penalties, foreclosure as a last resort. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the paper, feeling like the walls were closing in. This house was everything I had left. And Veronica knew it. That same week, contractors started canceling work, one by one, no explanations, just polite excuses and awkward pauses. Someone had been calling around, painting me as difficult, risky, a problem homeowner. Isolation is part of the strategy. By the time I realized what was happening, it felt too late. The board held meetings without notice, decisions were made without residents present, appeals vanished into silence. For the first time since the divorce, I felt the same helpless pressure in my chest. Like no matter how careful I was, the outcome was already decided. But desperation has a way of sharpening focus. I started documenting everything. Emails, photos, recordings, permits, every violation compared side by side with identical properties left untouched. Then I found it. Buried in old HOA documents, a clause allowing the association first rights on certain properties. Corner lots. Mine. And attached to it, a resolution appointing a preferred acquisition partner. Veronica's real estate company. This wasn't enforcement. It was extraction. They weren't trying to fix my fence. They were trying to force a sale. And for a moment, I truly believed they would succeed. Chapter 4, Turning Point, and CONSEQUENCS, approximately 800 WORDS. The shift didn't come from anger. It came from precision. I hired an attorney who specialized in HOA abuse. We didn't argue emotionally, we argued procedurally. Improper meetings. Undisclosed conflicts of interest. Selective enforcement documented across years. And then law enforcement got involved, not because of the fence, but because of what the board did next. Under cover of another emergency, a contractor entered my yard at dawn and cut down a protected tree. No permit, no notice. Hidden inside the branches. Cameras. Unregistered, wireless, pointed directly at my home. That was the moment everything collapsed for them. What followed wasn't dramatic shouting, it was subpoenas, audits, interviews, warrants. Financial records unraveled. Contracts were frozen. Statements conflicted. Every attempt to cover tracks created another charge. And when board members tried to handle it quietly, recorded conversations surfaced. Bribery, false reports, defamation. They didn't lose control all at once. They lost it inch by inch. Until the night they made the worst decision of all, attempting to remove my fence themselves. On camera. After warnings. While under investigation. That wasn't enforcement. That was evidence. 6 months later, the HOA board no longer existed. 3 members were removed permanently, criminal cases followed, civil judgments stacked, assets were seized. The lien was erased. The fines were refunded. Damages were paid. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching the neighborhood breathe again. No more surprise inspections. No more selective threats. No more fear disguised as governance. A new board was elected transparently, rules applied equally, financials were published publicly. And my fence, it never moved. Sometimes power doesn't collapse loudly. Sometimes it collapses because someone stayed calm, documented everything, and refused to disappear quietly. So here's my question for you. Have you ever dealt with someone who assumed authority meant immunity? And what did you do when they pushed too far? Let me know in the comments, because stories like this are far more common than people realize.